A few days ago, I was feeling really good about the Las Vegas Raiders. They had a really good draft and will be much improved on defense this year. Star receiver Devontae Adams and running back Josh Jacobs will be back on offense. Quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo knows head coach Josh McDaniels' offense, so he can lead that loaded offense to plenty of points this season. But then all of a sudden it comes out that Garoppolo failed his physical in March and might not be ready when training camp starts. So how do I feel now? I still feel good. Too bad a portion of Raider Nation thinks the skies in Raider Nation are falling. We aren't even in June yet. There are still plenty of things the Raiders can do to succeed this season, and here are 3 scenarios in which the Raiders can have that success under. But first, let's talk about how the Raiders didn't screw themselves knowing Garoppolo had this injury. One thing owner Mark Davis doesn't do is sign players to big contracts knowing they could possibly be damaged goods. I told you in the last video that he nixed a deal with Roger Saffold, a really good offensive lineman at the time when Reggie McKenzie was the GM. He nixed it after the team physician detected a shoulder injury in Saffold's physical, so I didn't think Davis would allow this with Garoppolo. It's nice to know he hasn't been mesmerized by the new regime enough to make a move like that unprotected after all. So GM Dave Ziegler inserted a clause into the contract that gets the Raiders out of any financial responsibility to Garoppolo if he has an injury related to the one he has. And if he can't pass a physical by the time training camp starts, the Raiders can get out of the deal without paying Garoppolo a penny. That clause is called Addendum G. The press conference to announce the deal was postponed so all those details could be worked out, so there's nothing to worry about. The Raiders fully covered their behinds. With that out of the way, let's go from the best case scenario to the worst in regards to where the Raiders go from here. The best case scenario is the Raiders go ahead and get Tom Brady on board. Davis has long been a fan of Brady and tried to get him in 2020 when then head coach John Gruden nixed it. As you know, the best case scenario is usually the least likely though. This is no exception because no NFL owner can suit up for his team and Brady just agreed to buy a portion of the Raiders. But the Raiders can work around that. Davis can push that ownership stake into the future. There is a precedence behind it. He represented Cliff Branch in one of his negotiations with Al Davis and got him a piece of the team as part of the deal. Al kicked Mark out of the house and didn't speak to him for weeks after that. 4th round pick Aiden O'Connell has a lot of traits in common with Brady, so it would be ideal for O'Connell to learn under Brady for a year. But again, even though you can't rule it out because you can't rule out anything when it comes to Brady, this is the least likely of scenarios, so we really can't count on it. In the worst case scenario, Garoppolo isn't quite ready at the start of training camp. If he plays one game for the Raiders, they're on the hook for $22 million in salaries, so they can simply scrap that deal and have another one waiting for him when he is ready. He can then continue with his rehab and the Raiders can make sure he's good and ready when he does come back. What if it takes a few weeks into the season? Well, if O'Connell is anything like Ziegler says he is, he'll beat backup quarterback Brian Hoyer out for the number 2 spot. From there, it is possible for him to win 2 home games and start the season, say, 2-3 after 5 games. At 2-3 after 5 games, the Raiders are still afloat. Making the playoffs as a wild card is still a big possibility. That's what I've always had in mind for the Raiders anyway. It pains me to say this, but let's be real. The Kansas City Chiefs are going to win the AFC West. Garoppolo wins when healthy, and he has the parts to do so with the Raiders right now. So I expect the Raiders to get hot and win some games when he takes over and get that wild card berth. Alright, the most likely scenario in this case is that Garoppolo is ready for the start of the training camp like he's supposed to be. The Brady scenario is obviously better because you're pairing one of the best receivers to ever do it with one of the best quarterbacks to ever do it. But it's also the least likely to happen, and we're moving on to the most likely scenario. One question about this is how will it all work out with Garoppolo and Adams without any work between them this offseason? I think this is a case of the system is the system and all the parts of the offense do things according to the system, meaning all the routes have to be run a certain way and Garoppolo is used to it. Therefore, there shouldn't be any timing issues. There won't be any Adams likes to run the route like this, so the timing is going to work out like that. Everything is at least the 2-man route concept in this offense, so the routes have to be run in accordance with the receiver closest to each receiver. So training camp should be enough for Garoppolo and Adams to get things the way they want them to be. I'm sure Jarrett Stidham had little to no rest with Adams until the week before his first start, and how did that go? Okay, Raider Nation, you can calm down. There's no reason to panic because Jimmy Garoppolo failed his physical way back in March and we're only heading into June now. There's plenty of time and there are plenty of ways the Raiders can go about making the 2023 season a successful one. In the worst of the three scenarios that I talked about, O'Connell can keep the Raiders afloat until Garoppolo gets back in about week 6. Who knows, even Hoyer might be able to do that. Then of course there's the fantasy of Tom Brady. Hey, you never know. Then there's the most likely one, that Garoppolo starts training camp on time and all this was about nothing. Thank you for watching. See you next time.